Welcome to the home of Star Witch, where we explore witch lore and astrology for all cunning magical folk. I invite you to join me, your host Mikailah, with a cup of your favourite magical elixir and indulge in some tantalising spellcrafting and witchy conversations. Hello, beautiful magical folk who are joining us. I have a very special magical witchy being that is with me today. It is Michelle from Aleph Studio, and Michelle is an incredible witch, occultist, and creative coach who I've known for many moons now, and she is joining me today on Wednesday, sacred to Mercury. So beautiful, Michelle, welcome. It's so wonderful to have you here in this sacred online cauldron, and we're going to be discussing your craft as a witch, as an occultist, and specifically your design, your craft in sigil making, online design and sigil making. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's so great to be with you here.
And my first question is, do you identify as a witch, and what does this mean to you?
Such a good question. I've probably given too much thought to this, actually, because I think that if you're a woman and you're a magical being and you're drawn to magic, being a witch seems to be the pathway, but it hasn't been my pathway into magic. And so when I think about, am I a witch and do I identify as a witch? And it is semantics to a certain point, but I feel like I almost identify more as a magician than a witch. And I think there is, a key difference. And for me, anyway, the reason that I sort of did that delineation was because witches to me have always, they're naturally witches. There seems to quite often be more of a connection to the earth and the natural world. It seems to be more of a very grounded, flowing type of magic. Where I came into magic was more through the occult, I guess. And so that is a very airy, heady type of magic, which makes sense for me. I mean, you know, my birth chart, my Gemini stellium. There's not a lot of earth in there. So it sort of makes sense that I would go in that direction. But also one of the other reasons that I'd sort of identify more of a magician than a witch is because to me, there's a lot of mental intention that goes into, there's a lot of work that goes into improving intuition, improving your ability to tap into other spaces and other magical realms. Like there was a process for me with that, and I had to learn it a lot. And I guess to me, the witch always felt more of a natural, more of a natural ability to do that. And I mean, you know, you are sort of the epitome of the archetype of the witch to me. And so I guess I'm a little bit interested if that sort of resonates with you. I mean, I see you as someone that's deeply connected to the earth and has quite a natural, effortless ability to be magical in the world. Yeah, I don't know. How does that sit with you?
Oh, it's fascinating, especially in this current modern day age where the identity of the witch is having a huge renaissance, especially in our online communities that both you and I work with, because we are, you know, online business entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And to me, the crafting and the dedication of a witch, even though it does come naturally and organically, to me, a witch follows the natural seasons and is very in tune, and I suppose in tune with the seen and the unseen worlds, and green witchery in a way, with the plants, with the animals, with the seasons. Not necessarily having to be a star witch following the heavens, because that's a segue more into esoteric occultism, isn't it? To do, and this is where the differentiation is quite fascinating, where the lines blur in a way, because it is semantics, and I would not necessarily call myself an occultist. And that's why I love what you've spoken to around being an occultist and a magician, or the term sorceress is very, very different in its meaning, and each to their own, with their own like individuation and craft path working. You know, these are fascinating, intriguing conversations we could spend hours and hours discussing, because Gemini stellium here as well. So very much ether.
On Mercury Day.
Yes, on Mercury Day, that's right. But it leads us into this sense of identity, and also what comes naturally and intuitively and organically for some individuals, other individuals have to remember. And that is the soul awakening. But also training and study as an occultist is quite different to witchcraft. Do you feel, Michelle? Would you like to share your views on that?
Absolutely. And I would imagine that, like you pointed out, so there's this connection to nature and the rhythms of the earth, and the rhythms of the seasons. And even though that sort of underlies magic in an occult sense, I could imagine, I don't know, I can imagine you literally, and I know you do this, you track the moon, you track Venus, you're outside, your magic happens a lot out there. It's a physical embodiment of magic connecting you with nature. And I guess I see the magician and the occultist. A lot of that training happens in your head, let's face it. And for a long time, I would look at magical women that were more witchy to me, and I would think that I'm not a magical being because I don't look like that. It's so, what I would call it was mind magic. And some of my witchy friends know this about me. That was the only word I had for it. But I know why that is the case, because I think the occult systems are definitely more about, I mean, you can do it inside. I do it inside. I rarely leave the house sometimes. I know that, you know, my beautiful witchy friends are always posting about grounding in nature and being outside. I'm like, I don't really do that. And I don't really have to do that. I have my own grounding practices that I can do, you know, inside, in my body, in my head. My head plays a really large role in my magic. And it's not necessarily the brain, it's more of that air, ether connection to the magic, whereas witches would come at it more from an earth water perspective, maybe, if we talk about elements. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And the alchemist, the occultist, the magician, or the magia, the you know, the feminine, the masculine, if you want to make the differentiation between the terms, with but the magical one is very much around that creative, intuitive knowledge and wisdom across the ages of time. And you spoke into earlier on around, there was a reason why we had mystery schools. Would you like to, for the listeners, just put your connective, amazing energy into the ancient mystery schools, and why that is so important, even for today's age, with learning wisdom, and that more, it's not necessarily intellectual, is it? But that creative, intuitive energy of working within this space.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely, because, and there's always been this dichotomy in my mind with magic, with the occult, because I mean, traditionally the word occult itself means hidden, and this knowledge was hidden from the masses. And part of me would love to de-occult it all, because I'm actually quite sure that we do have language that we can put around a lot of these concepts now. And it almost feels like the world is getting a little bit more ready to understand. And I think that's perhaps the reason why it was hidden and it was kept secret. One of the reasons was because people just weren't going to understand it. I mean, not to mention that you feared for your life in the West if you were that way inclined, and that was your system of spirituality. And so there's an understanding element to it. But also too, and I think this is probably more important in terms of the question, is you mentioned wisdom. And there's a really, really big difference, as most of us now know, especially as we get to a certain age, between wisdom and knowledge. And so I think what seems to happen now, we're in the information age. We've got access to literally any information we can possibly imagine. A lot of the occult texts are now completely de-occulted. They're out there for the world. A lot of them are on the public domain. You don't even have to buy them. They're just free PDFs everywhere. But there's a big difference between reading, and getting snippets, as we do now, and as the younger generations do now, getting snippets, really, really quick, short snippets online, thinking that they now hold some wisdom. But where the mystery schools, I believe, would have come in is more about delivering the information in such a way, a very sort of guarded, conservative way, where it was understood, where there were practical implications, where there was safety and hygiene mentioned, where there was much more depth to the information and the experience of it than there is now. And so part of me wants to go back and keep it a little bit secret and quiet. And I mean, I'm like this with music too. If I have a favorite band and they're a little bit obscure and then everyone jumps on board, it's sort of like, they're not as special anymore. And I sort of feel that way about occult and witchcraft to a certain extent. But the other, more, I guess, egalitarian side of me would love it to be free for all, because there's really important wisdom to be gained there that can literally change the world. But I guess there needs to be a process for it. It's like you wouldn't, I don't want to say that the occult content and information and rituals are like a gun, but I don't have a better I don't have a better analogy at the moment. But you wouldn't just give a gun to a child and say, oh, look, that can be really dangerous, but you deserve it because you're a human. It's a human right, to own something dangerous. Just be careful with it. Rather than going and doing training and getting a license to own that gun and not being able to shoot that gun until you've done so much work to be able to utilize like the technology that's in your hands.
Brilliant,
But,
Michelle.
Yeah, it's a little bit like that.
It is, absolutely, because whilst the information is now almost freely given, which is wonderful, that what we spoke into, there's not that elitist superiority edge of worthiness to receive. There is still great responsibility that comes with this knowledge.
Yeah, indeed.
And it comes with the knowledge of crafting spells and rituals, and actually taking your time to learn your craft with what you're working with. It takes patience, dedication, perseverance, and humility in a way, a humbleness.
Absolutely. Yeah.
As many people know, I have a personal edge around this conversation because I'm pretty sure a lot of us were keepers of the sacred mysteries. And then that brings up that inversion of being a gatekeeper of knowledge.
That's
and
right.
There's a natural affinity of being a gatekeeper to say, yes, but study what this is about and take this responsibility seriously. So that's why I loved your analogy. It's absolutely perfect for this. Thank you.
Exactly. Yeah, no problem. And I guess it's also gatekeeping versus holding and being a knowledge keeper. The missing element between the two, I think, is care. If you're a holder of wisdom, you care for it. You see how special it is and it's important, and you don't want it to be defiled or misused. And so if you're a gatekeeper, you just want to keep it hidden and it's only for me, it's only for the special ones. But there's that little energetic difference, isn't there, between something, this is something that I really love and care for, I'm going to give it to you, but please be really careful with it, versus, oh no, you just can't have it because it's mine.
Beautiful. Thanks, Michelle. And so that's a wonderful segue into, you are a branding designer and creative coach. So you have your own business, your own online design business to help creative intuitives and artists in their business and their expression of their identity. Do you want to speak a little bit into what identity is and how you support creative, magical folk?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I guess it all began when I became a graphic designer, and the thing that I became a little bit obsessed with very, very quickly was branding. And branding is essentially finding the strongest, most authentic expression of your identity and crafting visuals around that, or crafting an experience or a culture around that, like from a sort of higher point of view. But as far as identity design went, that's where I could finally use my interest in psychology and my interest in archetypes and my interest in just identity expression generally. It's something very close to my heart because I, as probably many magical people are, I would imagine, have come from a life of wondering who the hell I am, and also feeling, because I'm not that and I'm not that and I'm not all of the things that I'm seeing around me in the world, then one, what am I? And two, no one understands me. So, I've had this core wound for so much of my life, childhood and adulthood, where I feel like I'm misunderstood or not understood because I'm a little bit different. I'm sure this goes way beyond just magical folk. But in my determination and sort of in my yearning and at times in my desperation to find who I was, I realized that, well, surely if I'm feeling that way, then others would be feeling that way. And I think the roads that I took to find who I was and to see who I was, I'm now using to help other people find out who they are. Because it's definitely not straightforward, and it's definitely not an easy thing to find, because a lot of us, and especially intuitive, sensitive, creative humans, we are vast. Our identities are very, very vast. And I'm quite sure that that is one of the things that makes us able to create and to or design things that actually are felt by people, because we've felt so many different things. We've embodied so many different versions of ourselves or roles that we've tried to play to fit into the world. So we've got a really good understanding of not only our own identity after searching for it, but also a lot of other people's identity as well. And so I guess I feel like I've got little tricks and tips to try and find that and bring it out, because when you see it, you know it. Like when it's right, there's just some sort of like alignment inside that just goes, that's yes. Ah, yes, that's me.
I remember that feeling from when you did the beautiful design for me,
Yeah.
with the creative coaching and branding several years back. But also, I've been fascinated with your metamorphosis as well into sigil crafting. And would you like to share what are sigils traditionally? And then how do you present that with your on, like you have an Instagram account, Sigil Craft, and this side of your business. So what are sigils? And
Excellent.
what is the modern interpretation for you?
Yeah, exactly. Well, the beautiful thing is, and how I started to realize how powerful sigils were, was because the modern articulation of the sigil is literally a logo. And so I had just spent years and years and years being quite obsessed with logos and quite really interested in what a logo can communicate and what essence and what energetics can be distilled into a symbol. So that was really fascinating. But also too, like branding is like a hyper sigil. It's a sigil with lots of window dressing around it to enhance the sigil. And so I've been designing sigils forever and not actually really consciously been designing sigils. And I mean, sigil crafting in terms of magic sigils is something that I'd sort of dabbled with forever, because I'm a visual person, and it really helps me to be able to see parts of rituals and magic and things like that. So I've enjoyed playing around with sigils, but what I found was that the way that I was taught how to create sigils was really from, I guess, like the school of chaos magic, which is not a school at all, because it's just like little bits of all different schools, which just suits me perfectly. But yeah, they're really big advocates for sigil magic, and because it's all about belief and it's the mind. And essentially, so what a sigil is to me is a way of taking a conscious thought or desire, putting effort into crafting a visual around that, and then either letting that go and believing and having faith that it's now in the greater recesses of your mind, in your subconscious or your unconscious, living in a different place. That's how sigils work. But I also realize that they don't, I mean, traditionally, and I don't know how other schools would approach this, but I know for chaos magic, like there is definitely a part of create the sigil, all about the intent and the energy going into creation of it, then get rid of it. You don't want to think about it, care about it, see it. It's gone. It's living there, and that's where the magic happens. But I don't believe that anymore, and I don't believe that because I've seen how my brand designs have impacted people, and that's something that you see all the time. It's a reminder, it's there every day. And so now, I guess I thought that if I can create a sigil that looks like a work of art, and that's something to keep and something that generates the feeling of your desire being made manifest, and it's there all the time, and you love it, and it's a work of art that you can look at and feel joy, then let's just flip that little script about, why a sigil works, and let's try and make it work this way. And I'm quite sure that, to me, and, I'm not a sigil scholar, but I feel that especially if you're a visually inclined person, like I certainly am. I wouldn't be doing the job that I've been doing if I wasn't visually inclined. And I have a Libra moon, so I love pretty things. And the sigils that I design for people are now beautiful. They're symmetrical. So there's this beautiful balance. And so to me, if I'm looking at one of those creations, there's just a part of me that sort of just gets into that beautiful, calm, grounded, space of being able to receive the magic and the intent from that sigil. So I'm not sure if that's actually really answered the question, what is a sigil? But let's just really bring it back to say that a sigil is a symbol that has been crafted with intent and energy to bring one's desires out into the world.
Thank you. And just for the listeners and the viewers, I would love to share, because I commissioned Michelle last year to craft a secret sigil for me, because there was an intense experience that I was going through online. And even I was aware with my website, with my social media platforms. And yes, I am a Saturn Sun individual in fixed Earth Taurus in my first house of identity. So I do have this edge of being a mistress of sacred knowledge, say. And whether it's from other times or places, a keeper of the mysteries, and words are spells to me. And I do respect the honor and lineage of where teachings have come from. So I'm always, hopefully with great integrity, giving honor to the lineages of where particular teachings come from, where I've learnt them from. But also I'm aware we all have natural intuitive gifts within us that are part of our soul essence. But I was going through an experience, let's just call it that, hey Michelle, last year, around magical gifts being stolen. Now, that is up for conjecture as well, whether we can spend hours discussing that. But Michelle and I had incredible conversations around the energetics of being keepers of mysteries and what does that mean in our modern day world. And there's no right or wrong. We were just in our beautiful Gemini way unpacking everything. And so I commissioned Michelle because it was during the Venus retrograde in Leo with Black Moon Lilith in Leo. So strong Egyptian high ceremonial magic was the signature at the time. And Michelle was commissioned to design a secret sigil for me that would be woven almost like a watermark between my social media accounts, my posts, my words, my images, and my website. And it was commissioned with the intent of only those with the purest of hearts will see this magic. And it worked. It actually worked. Michelle, do you have anything you'd like to offer to share? Because I just wanted to share that personal story so that for those of you that are listening, you can start to also understand the benefits, not just from graphic design and magical branding around your creative identity and business, but also how, if you have an online business, how you can work with these sigils that Michelle crafts and channels through. Just on a side note, because I'm a witch, one of my all-time favorite things to do is to paint sigils on the soles of my shoes. And then when I'm out walking, just the thought of those magical sigils touching Mother Earth on my shoes that I'm wearing as a witch, I cannot explain how much joy that brings me. I just have the biggest smile on my face. So, you know, there's so many ways we can work with sigils. But Michelle, back to you with how that design, if you can cast your mind back, because we worked with the astrology, didn't we? We really spent a lot of time in devotional conversation around this.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, that sigil that we designed, because even though you weren't, you know, holding my hand while I made it into visual form, the co-creation was obviously happening way before that. And it was really interesting for me because I knew that it worked. And I know that sigils do work, but it's just difficult to quantify if they work or not. But I know deep down that a lot of the time they do work, and I'm trying to work out for myself why do sigils work, and especially when you're creating a sigil for someone else, why does that work? Because I know the theory behind creating one for yourself and why that would work, because it's a very personal thing. But the way that I see it now is that, I mean, that has an energetic imprint times 2, like your sigil, for example, because you had a very clear and strong intention behind it. You had a beautiful, caring relationship for why you wanted that to be in the world. And so you had done half of the magic already. And then because I could then come in and enhance that and put visual form to that, it's like 2 witches, I guess, coming together on the same spell. So, of course, that's going to amplify, I believe, what's happening here. But the same theory is going to apply to any 2 people, I think, coming together with the one intent. Because even if, and, you know, a lot of people do commission sigils from myself, and I guess they're very rarely for business these days. They're not being used commercially. I mean, my logos and branding obviously is, but when people come to sigil craft for a sigil, it's either what I call a personal seal, which is a symbolic representation of what I'm perceiving as your core, like, soul essence. Even throughout time, comes back to identity. Like, I am sitting there feeling who you are and what your magic is, and I'm trying to bring that into a form, and that can be used. And I really love those. It's used using the name, using the letters in your name. So you said, you know, words are spells. Letters are obviously spells, and your name is sacred, you know, I think. So by using the letters in your name to craft a unique seal for yourself, I just feel that and people are telling me this as well, they're using these in any of their own rituals that they're doing. If they've ever need to draw some strength from something, or they're lost in their identity a bit and they need to remember who they are, they can work with the sigil to really have that remembrance. Just love, I think that it's just so beautiful being able to be so personally involved in someone's sort of life that way and identity that way. But also too, like, one person that I designed a sigil for, it came to her during childbirth. So in the pit of, holy shit, I'm not going to make it, this is too much for me, the sigil flashed into her mind, and she said, you know, and it was a reminder of her. It's like, oh, that's who I am. I've done this so many times before. I've got this. Let's go. So the personal seals are really beautiful, and can work really well for personal strength and identity. But then there's spell sigils, which is the other main sigil that I'm commissioned to do. And the spell sigils are what you would think of as a traditional sigil. And this is how I learned to do sigils. So you craft a statement of intent, a very short, concise, powerful statement of intent, which I think is magic already, just doing that. And then, you know, it's a process of taking out all of the vowels and all the repeating consonants till you're left with this refined message, and hopefully just a handful of letters. And then it's a matter of placing those letters in the right configuration that holds the energy of the spell. So that is another way that people are using the sigils that I am creating for them. And so these are, you know, things that you want to get, things that you desire happening in the world, any goals that you might be setting, protection, comes under that as well. And that was obviously what we're creating for you. It was a protection sigil. And interestingly, I've done a number of protection sigils for people. Like since that, there seems to be a theme of needing just that little bit of extra etheric sheltering of what people are putting into the world. Yeah, it's just interesting in itself, really. But yeah, those are the different types of sigils that, you know, I sort of play with and create. They both work in different ways, and yeah, I feel like it's only just the beginning. It's not. It's something that because of the way that I was taught, as I've mentioned, and the way that it's something that you do for yourself. It took me a long time to actually come out and offer sigil creation for others, because I needed to know, I needed to really work out for myself sort of why are they working, how have they worked in the past, what's actually happening, and can this happen when you outsource that magic to someone else. And what I've discovered is that, yeah, you can absolutely do it that way, and it's potentially even more impactful.
Fascinating. And Michelle, it sounds like sigil crafting, whether it's as an individual or a collaboration in modern day times, does sigil crafting, what is the lineage? It is an occult art, isn't it? So does it go back to Arabic times, or was it prominent in medieval times? Like, do you have a feeling historically of where this originates from?
I've looked into this, and you know, I cannot find the answer. I can't find a definitive answer. The answer seems to differ between people that you hear or read. And I guess it also comes down to what is a sigil and how are we defining the sigil. I feel like the concept of a sigil as a symbol alone that holds energy and meaning and magic probably goes way back to Mesopotamia. Like, I feel that that's probably, you know, the beginning. But I think that the sigils as we know now in the modern age, so whether that's like planetary sigils, that was a Middle Ages like type thing. Chaos magic sigils were probably only starting to play with that from a mind perspective, gosh, what, in the like 80s or something. So that's, you know, quite contemporary. I mean, not to some people that are listening to this, that probably sounds quite antique, but still quite contemporary.
Yeah, so we're talking 1980s, aren't we?
Yes, we are talking 1980s, yes.
And the thing is, this is a question that it depends on whether you pose this question to an occultist or an academic scholar.
Yeah, 100%.
Talking about, you know, scholarly reviews and ancient history and references, and yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I love it and I hate it when I can't find the answer to something like that.
Yes.
But yeah, I guess what I find, just as generally what I find with magical content, is that it's slippery for a reason. It's the mystery. There's a lot of it that's not actually meant to be in our human experience. And so you can dig and dig and dig, and you think you're right there and you're on the precipice of finding the actual answer to things. And it just falls through your hands and it takes you right back to the beginning. I don't know if you find that, but
Alice in Wonderland.
Absolutely.
Love that.
Yeah.
And Michelle, this has been so fascinating. Just when you are creating sigils for clients, because obviously it's online, so they receive that as a design, because, you know, we're not grafting it onto an actual magical object these days. Well, you can, but from your perspective as a designer, how do you deliver the sigil to
the sigils are delivered like as a digital file. So like a logo would be, essentially, I treat them digitally like it's a logo. So you get a few file types, you know, a PNG, so that you can place it on, you know, other backgrounds without having like that white box around it. A PDF, if you ever want to print it or get it embroidered or etched or something, so that you can actually use it. But yeah, it's a digital file that you'll get. But it's interesting that you bring up, like, traditionally you would etch it on things. I encourage people to do that with the sigils that I create for them, because I mean, in terms of sigil creation, there is an activation that one does with it, and then there's a charging that one does with it. And so as far as that goes, when I'm delivering for other people, I will activate it, and it's sort of part of my process. But to make it your own, there's a charging up of that, so that you're infusing your own energy into it, so that it's more personalized for you, and it's not floating around in my field thinking like, is it meant to be working for me or who? It's a weird way of explaining it, but that's how it feels. That's how it feels to me.
We went through that process, didn't we? You
Yes.
did the sigil to me, but then I had to go through the fusing and the activation of taking ownership of it, and when to put it out into the world or to work with it myself.
Yeah, exactly. But I like to make them as simple, as beautiful and intricate, like a balance between beautiful, intricate, a work of art, and something that's still easy enough for you to, one, visualize when your eyes are closed, and two, play with it and draw it and doodle it, or etch it onto a candle, or etch it onto the soles of your shoes, or however you like to do it. Like sigils, I think they should be used. Not just like sitting there in the corner. Like, play with them. They want to play.
Very practical magic, which is what I love. It's the practical magic in the everyday, isn't it?
Yes.
Which is just makes my soul sing.
Exactly. It's much needed in this world of logic and reason, and overcompensation with that. So any little way, I think, that we can bring that stuff into our everyday lives, just to remember to have one foot in that magical world at all times. Just, I can only imagine that would make the world a much better place to live in for everyone involved.
Yeah, bring back all the magic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Is there anything else that you can think of around sigil crafting or meaning that you would like to share, or anything closing that you would like to leave the listeners with?
Actually, what is coming sort of through for me at the moment, considering your audience, is that there's a really important part of sigil crafting that can be really easy to forget. But if anyone's sort of listening and wanting to do this for themselves, can't emphasize enough the importance of space setting. And it doesn't, when you're starting out, I find that it's really helpful to create a space around you that is conducive to the energies that you want to bring forth in your sigil. When I started creating sigils, what I would do was have a bit of a trip around the house, and some little trinkets might call out at me that, oh yeah, that works for this and that. Yep, okay. So I'll grab a few little things. I'd set up my space. I'd light a candle every time, put my little things around, set the physical space. So do that. That's a really easy thing to do. But like, once if you're practiced with setting your inner space, that's probably more important than your outer space. But the outer space is a way to achieve the inner space. So what I do now, I don't even set up. I can do a sigil anywhere. I've done it on the train up to Hervey Bay. I do it in front of the TV sometimes, because it literally doesn't matter, because I know, and with practice, I've been able to like just get that inner internal alignment, and it's like an on or an off thing. You know when it's in alignment, when you're in the right spot to start designing. But I think that setting plays a really strong role in the success of your creation or not. It's going to help it come through more easily, and it's going to, well, what my theory is, that if you've got that alignment, especially that inner alignment, which includes grounding and protection, it's got that feel to it. And however people want to do that is cool. You know, you might want to draw an etheric circle around yourself, whatever you want to do. For me, it's always an internal job. But to do that, it's like, one, putting me in the energetics of creation for this particular sigil, and two, it's protecting the creation of the sigil as well. So it's a really good place to start from. I think a really important place to start from when you're designing your own. Yeah, and you'll find too that then when you've got that that feeling, that sort of signpost feeling of alignment, and when things are right, when you're in the right place energetically, as you're designing your sigil, it's sometimes hard to know when to stop piecing it all together. Like, when's it done? Like, when does it look right? When can I do something else? Like, when's it right? And that feeling comes into play when it's right. And so when the configuration falls into place, it's just like that for me anyway. It just sort of sits in there, everything sort of clicks in, and it's like, okay, it's done. So that's really handy if anyone's, you know, considering playing their own little sigil games.
Oh, thank you. That is a great reflection as well, because it is also about bringing it back to the individual and how we craft our own energy with our own intention.
Yeah, absolutely.
The magician within.
Yeah.
The magical being within. There is something quite powerful about being witnessed and acknowledged in a collaboration. One of my personal questions is, do you feel a sigil is an encompassed visual spell, or do you feel it's a separate process to spell crafting in a way, because sigils have got a lineage to the occult, and it works with very particular processes around letters and imagery? And I know there's been evolutions and magical processes. And what do you feel around that, Michelle?
That is such an excellent question. I love that. And what I'm thinking, I've usually got two answers for things. One is that there is obviously, and I know this to be true deep down in my bones, when there is a lineage attached, it has power of its own, just because of all of the times and the humans that are imprinting and doing that process over and over and over and over again. The process becomes alive and it has power of its own. So you sort of just come in, you know, on the coattails of an energetic current that's already flowing. That's why traditional, you know, occult lineages are important for things like that, I think. But also the chaos magician in me is just like, do whatever you want. Like, do whatever works. Because if you've got a sincere feeling of excitement and inspiration and like determination, and this is something that I want to do, and I feel like this is the way for me to do it right, there's something in that as well. Like, there's definitely something there that's a little bit different, and there's probably a key in the details of how you want to do it that is actually going to fit into the lock of your personal desire. So it's not really an answer. It's a twofold answer. It's quite contradictory answer, but I do quite often answer questions that way.
I love that. That's your Gemini stallion. Exactly. I love it. And I love that we've got options and choices of how to flow. So there's boundaries and respect and integrity, but then there's that magical movement of flow within that to find your own rhythm, to find your own inspiration and passion and creativity within.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, thank you so much, Michelle. And for those of you that wish to discover or work with Michelle in more detail, your website is?
My website is aleph.studio. So it's ALEPH.studio, no .com, aleph.studio. It's my website. But I'm usually hanging out on Instagram somewhere. So you can find me at Aleph Creative Studio. on Instagram, and Sigil Craft is my other account. If you find one, you'll find the other because I link them both. So they're both me, and yeah, both parts of what I do in the world out there.
And I will put your contact details in the descriptive paragraph of our incredible conversation on sigil crafting.
So, sounds amazing.
Thank you, beautiful, magical one.
Thank you, Mikailah. It's lovely to speak to you.
And sharing your incredible wisdom and craft. Always the deepest honor to those who have spent many, many moons and lifetimes working at their chosen sacred craft, in the way that you hold it with deep reverence and humbleness, but in a way that incredible reverence for every being that you come into contact with.
Beautiful. Well said.
Thank you, all you magical, cunning folk, for joining me here and sharing our precious time together. If you'd like to subscribe to my channel for magical folk, and follow me on any platform where it is that you have discovered me. See you in the wild, magical woods.